When you leap into the unknown, what do you yell? For generations of American paratroopers, the answer has been a single name: Geronimo. But why? Why that name? Why the name of a legendary Apache warrior who spent decades fighting against the United States? The real story behind that word is wild. It involves a 19th century massacre, a Hollywood Western, a few too many beers, and a drunken dare that accidentally sparked the most famous battle cry in military history. But it also involves a deep, painful controversy that forces us to ask a tough question. Is this shout a tribute to a hero, or is it a profound insult? This is the true, complicated story of Geronimo. Long before any soldier shouted his name from a plane, there was the man. And he wasn't born Geronimo. His name was Goyawe, a Bedonkohe Apache born in 1829 in what's now New Mexico. His name meant one who yawns. He was a husband and a father to 3 children. By all accounts, his early life was pretty unremarkable. But in 1851, that life was shattered. While Goyawe and other men were away on a trading trip, a column of 400 Mexican soldiers swept down on their undefended camp. When he returned, he walked into a nightmare. His wife, his 3 children, and his mother were all dead, slaughtered in the raid. Faced with that kind of loss, Goyawe didn't just break, he was reforged. He later described hearing a voice in the wilderness, a spirit that promised him, "You will never die in battle, nor will you die by gun. I will guide your arrows." Whether it was a true spiritual vision or the manifestation of an unimaginable grief, something inside him hardened into a single burning purpose: vengeance. He would spend the rest of his life fighting the people who had destroyed his world. He became a brilliant and ferocious warrior, leading raids against both Mexican and, later, American forces who pushed into Apache lands. And it was in one of those battles that his famous name was born. As he charged a line of Mexican soldiers, seemingly immune to their bullets, they began crying out in terror to their patron saint, "Geronimo! Geronimo!" the Spanish for Saint Jerome. Goyawe heard their terrified prayers and took the name for himself. Geronimo became his moniker, a name that would terrify his enemies and stand as a symbol of defiant resistance for decades. He was never technically a chief, but he was a revered spiritual leader and military strategist who fought with a small band of followers against impossible odds, evading capture for years. To the U.S. government, he was a hostile. To his people, he was the last defender of their way of life. Now, flash forward nearly a century to the summer of 1940 at Fort Benning, Georgia. The world was tipping into another massive war, and the U.S. Army was trying out a radical new idea: dropping soldiers from airplanes behind enemy lines. This was the birth of the paratroopers, and the men of the 1st Parachute Test Platoon were a special kind of volunteer. The night before their first ever mass jump, a group of these soldiers did what young men often do when they're terrified. They went looking for a distraction. They headed to the Post Theater to watch a movie, most likely the 1939 Western, Geronimo. Afterwards, they hit the beer garden to settle their nerves. Among them was Private Aubrey Eberhardt. Fueled by some liquid courage, he started boasting that he wasn't scared of the next day's jump. His buddies, who were all feeling that same knot of fear in their stomachs, immediately called his bluff. They ribbed him, saying he'd be so terrified in the door of that plane, he wouldn't even be able to remember his own name. Backed into a corner, Eberhardt shot back with a declaration that would make history. The story goes that he yelled something like, "All right, damn it. I'll tell you jokers what I'm gonna do. To prove I'm not scared, when I jump, I'm gonna yell, 'Geronimo,' as loud as I can." The next day, as the plane climbed, you could cut the tension with a knife. One by one, the men shuffled to the open door and leaped out, shouting their names for the jump master. Then it was Eberhardt's turn. True to his word, as he threw himself into the sky, he didn't yell, "Eberhardt." He bellowed, Geronimo! The cry was a defiant roar against fear itself, and his fellow paratroopers loved it. Soon they were all yelling it, and a tradition was born from a boast over beers. What started as a dare quickly became an unofficial tradition. The cry seemed to capture everything these new airborne soldiers were about: tough, daring, and fearless. It became their rallying cry. The 501st and 509th Parachute Infantry Regiments even formally adopted the name. The 501st reportedly tracked down Geronimo's descendants to ask for permission to use his name on their official unit insignia, a request that was said to have been granted with pride. When America entered World War II, the paratroopers and their unique battle cry were launched onto the world stage. Newsreels showed these brave men yelling the name of an Apache warrior as they jumped into combat zones, and the public was captivated. The shout, "Geronimo," became synonymous with courage and a kind of wild American spirit. The cultural impact was huge. Soon, it wasn't just soldiers. Kids all over America were shouting "Geronimo" as they jumped off diving boards or out of tree houses. The word detached itself from its origins and became a universal exclamation for any act of bravery or exhilarating fun. From a name whispered in fear by soldiers in Mexico to a dare at Fort Benning, Geronimo had become a piece of Americana. Even in the military, the tradition had its critics. Some high-ranking officers saw it as a breakdown of discipline, but for a time, the view that it was vital to morale won out. As warfare evolved, however, yelling anything during a combat jump became a tactical liability. It was a great way to announce your exact position to the enemy. The practice was eventually discouraged in combat and wasn't included in official training manuals. But the bigger controversy has nothing to do with tactics. It's about history and respect. For many Native Americans, the use of Geronimo's name by the same military he fought is a painful irony. This was a man who resisted American expansion, was captured, and died a prisoner of war at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in 1909. On his deathbed, he reportedly told his nephew, "I should have never surrendered. I should have fought until I was the last man alive." To have his name adopted as a mascot for American military might is seen by many as an act of profound disrespect that sanitizes a brutal history. This simmering issue exploded into the international spotlight on May 2, 2011. That was the night a team of U.S. Navy SEALs carried out the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. As the world absorbed the news, a single detail emerged that caused outrage in Native American communities. The code word for the successful capture or killing of bin Laden was Geronimo. The confirmation came in the message sent back to the White House: Geronimo EKIA, enemy killed in action. The backlash was swift. The chairman of the Fort Sill Apache tribe, Jeff Hauser, wrote to President Obama, stating that linking a revered leader to one of the most despicable enemies this country has ever had was a painful and offensive mistake. Harlan Geronimo, the warrior's great-grandson, called it an outrageous insult. The message, many felt, was clear. In the institutional memory of the U.S. military, the Indian was still seen as the quintessential enemy. The Pentagon insisted that no disrespect was intended, but the incident laid bare the uncomfortable and unresolved legacy at the heart of the famous battle cry. So we're left with this single word that's been on an unbelievable journey. Think about it. It started as a Catholic saint's name, became the feared moniker of an Apache warrior, was reborn from a drunken dare at Fort Benning, turned into a global cry for courage, and finally became a flashpoint for a painful and necessary conversation about history, memory, and respect. The story of Geronimo isn't simple. It's a story of courage, but also of conflict. It's a story of brotherhood, but also of profound controversy. In so many ways, it's a story of America itself, complex, contradictory, and still figuring things out. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think? Is shouting Geronimo a respectful tribute to a legendary warrior's bravery, or is it a thoughtless appropriation of a painful history? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this story, please subscribe to Tales from the Globe, where history's voices comes alive.